Good morning, this is Rabbi Shlomo Furst here at Yeshiva Samanavshi. Here in Yerushalayim, Kodesh. We're located not too far from the central bus station, so you can walk from there, take a bus, drive. And if you're coming from Furst, please join us. We're located in the Haneki Yeshua's Beit Knesset on Rehov Zikr number 6. This is the first year, starting generally at 9 o'clock. And we're learning Pirkei Avos. We're in the first Perek. Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai, Moshe Yeshua. Yeshua is a Canaan, was a Canaan Levine, Moshe, the Anshe Knesset Gedolim. And finally, the Levine transmitted the Torah that was given from generation to generation from Moshe Rabbeinu, straight from the Kadosh Baruch Hu down through each generation to the Anshe Knesset Gedolim. Heim Amru Shlosh Devar. They said three things which are pertinent to the Kiyum of Torah, the preservation of Torah. Obviously said many more things than just three. And those things were Hayu Misuni B'din, which we discussed last week, Bamidu Talmidim Harbe, which we'll be discussing this week, and finally the third was Ososai the Torah, make a fence for the Torah. Okay, let's take a look at our sheets here, and we'll be going into the ideas behind why it's necessary that we establish many Talmidim, and that's relevant, and its relevance to us, and its relevance to the preservation of the Torah. Let's begin with the very top, number 1. Who'd like to read? Huh?
ירחב דברים פרק א' אבוא מתונים בדין פירוש שלו להורות לצד הסברה אלא אף על פי עומק החקירה מכוח ההכרח שאי אפשר לומר באופן אחר.
So it's saying here, an explanation why do we have to be Masunim Medin, that you shouldn't rely on logic, svara, right? Rather, you have to be involved with Oimer Tachkir, you have to do in-depth analysis with the Koyach Achreya that you want to come to a decision. You want to use the analysis to come to a clear decision as to what is going to be the outcome.
וזהו אף על פי היות התלמוד במדרשות של התורה והזהירו עוד העמידו תלמידים הרבה דמועיל לפלפלו של תורה כתנן מרבה ישיבה מרבה חכמה ועשו סייג בתורה על ידי הסכמות מזה תגבר הפרפור בחקירה ושומר את האורה שלו ימות.
Very good. As we learned this last week, so part of what it was involved with the Sunnah Medin, right, that to come out to that clarity of decision, right, you have to have a corresponding Talmid harbor. You have to have a lot of Talmidim. Why? The Moyel, it's advantageous, the Kufulu Shel Torah. Having a lot of Talmidim, the more Talmidim you have, the more different viewpoints and ways of looking at an analysis of every particular point.
But you have to look at it because you have Moshe Rabbeinu then now, and Moshe Rabbeinu, they were the bosses. It's they didn't have to put anything.
Yeah, well,
what they said was the.
That originally was the case when we were when the transmission began from Har Sinai to Moshe to Yeshua.
So we're not talking about Moshe's time, right?
No, this is something which the Anshe Knesset Gadol had already mentioned.
They had problems.
Right. Well, it was necessary to do a lot more. Right. As we have a process which is called Yeridas Adoros. Yeridas Adoros is a concept which is literally, it means the decline of generations. I mean, what does it mean, the decline of generations? I mean, we have the ultimate generation of those who came out of Mitzrayim. They came to Har Sinai, they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we're going to accept and do everything in the Torah. And they accepted the Torah from the Kadosh Baruch Hu. They saw Nisim, the voice, wonders and miracles in Mitzrayim, on the Yam Suf. They saw at the time of Har Sinai, the Shiva Rekim, the 7 heavens opening up, and they could see his much as visionary experience than any human was ever possible to see. It was the greatest experience of humanity in all of history. And from that point onward, things declined. Okay? Things declined. That was the ultimate of the transmission of Torah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, directly to Am Yisrael and to Moshe Rabbeinu. And from that time on, each generation that we get further and further away from Har Sinai, right, that impact, that understanding of Torah gets weaker and weaker. Okay, so that's what we call the Readers of Dodra. So at the time of the Anshe Kedushah Gedola, when they came back from Babel, the first Golus of 70 years in Babel, so they came back to Eretz Yisrael, they had the opportunity to rebuild the base of English, to reestablish Torah and Torah life here in Eretz Yisrael. So one of the things they realized was they had to have these three things: Nesuni B'din, Aminim Talmud Harbe, and also Sayag Torah. That was going to be to preserve what they tried to reinstate, the Gibur of a Noira of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all through the situations of Gullus that we're even experiencing Ad Hayom. Right? So therefore, in order to get to this full, deep analysis that you want to have, to make the full, clear decision, you have to have as many Talmidim as possible, because that's going to aid you in making the proper decision, because with all the different discussions and the different ways of understanding any particular point, right, eventually a consensus will be reached, and the larger group that's involved with consensus, the greater truth it has to it. Yeah.
I'm not understanding the concept here. If you're telling me that there's a Torah, and the Torah comes from God, and God gave it to Moshe, and Moshe gives it to the Jews, however you want to, that's the transmission, right? Sinai, Moshe, that's what we're learning.
Right.
If you're telling me that we want to have a lot of Talmidim because we want to have different understandings,
Different ways of approach, different ways of we have when you're talking about the original thing that they said was Mesunim B'din, meaning what is Mesunim B'din? There's a judgment to be made. You have to make a judgment. Some case is coming up, and you have to make a judgment. For example, I'll give you a case in point. Let's say Bisman Hazeh. You have the internet, right? You have internet. You have a Jewish man who wants to keep Shabbos, right? He has a business. He has an internet business, right? He sells and buys things over the internet, right? In our time, everything works 24/7, right? China, Philippines, Honolulu, San Francisco, Houston, Texas, New York, right? Paris, London, Rome, right? And then, last but not least, Chaviv, Acharon, Yerushalayim, Yerakim, right? And here you have a Yid keeping Shabbos in Yerushalayim, and he's doing business all over the world, right? And people are buying things on his internet. On Shabbos, Goyim, hopefully not Jews on Shabbos, right? So how's he supposed to run his internet business on Shabbos? So this is something which Moshe Rabbeinu never was experiencing, right? Even though maybe through his power of vision and power of understanding of all of the world's workings forever and ever as humanly possible. So he may have had some understanding of what this was about. But how does the Torah approach this problem, right? So you have to deal with that, and you have to have certain people who understand what the facts are, how the things work, how the businesses work, what's going on. And you have to have Talmidei Chachamim who understand what the Torah expects to do in such a situation. So there, the more kinds of people you have involved with the analysis of the problem, the more closely you're going to come to what we call Mesunim B'din. You'll be patient and deliberate in judgment, and come to a proper and truthful understanding of what to do in such a case. So you have medical questions that come up in our time, which were not relevant and known about in previous generations. How do you deal with those? Each generation has at the forefront of its Torah new things which never occurred before. Right? So, but it's true. With the Torah we were given the Torah, and the Torah Shabbat, the Gemara that we have, that's our basis for all our decisions. Right? So the question is, does this Gemara apply to this situation? Does it apply 100%, 50%? Right? Is there another Gemara which could be used as a proof for that, or maybe contradict that? Right? Also with the poskim, we have Mishnah, for example, Mishnah Brewers. You have a Mishnah Brewer, he says this about that. right? Can that be applied to something else that wasn't spoken about? Right? So when you have these kind of questions, so you have opinions through the people that you're dealing with, you're learning with, and you gather all these opinions. You try and come up with a consensus opinion which is most truthful. And then finally come to a decision, and that'll be the actual decision.
Okay.
Good?
Well, I have an example, Marshall, for you. Remember, when you were a child, you ever play the telephone game?
Sure.
Okay. So the first person says something. By the time it comes around the circle, it bears no relation to what the first person said, usually. Okay. That's what Eurydice Adoris means. That it goes down, it got passed down from Moshe to generation, and each person missed something in the transmission. By the time if you're not careful, by the time you get to the end, it doesn't mean anything. That's why you have Harbe Talmidim. That in each generation you have many Talmidim to make sure that the understanding is maintained and the message doesn't get corrupted as you go from generation to generation.
Okay.
Right, like the example is very nice. If you use it, if the telephone game is from one person to the next, so you can never verify if the second person is passing on to the third person will really never know if that's what the first person really said, right? But the first person says it to 10 people, right? And then those 10 people go say it to another 10 people, right? So then you can verify if what the first 10 are saying over to the second 10 was really what the first person said.
Okay.
Good, very nice. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. So now, what does Rashi explain in terms of that we should? That's the point about why it's important to be establishing many talmidim, right? And let's see what Rashi says about that. Number 2 on our page.
פירוש רש"י על אבות פרק א', העמידו תלמידים הרבה, שאם עמד תלמידים בבחירתך
From your zman, you're in your young years, but from Bechor.
בבחירתך, סליחה. למדה ותלמידים אף בזקנתך, שאי אתה יודע איזה מהם יכשל בחברו.
Oh, so we have here, Rashi says that a different approach, what it's supposed to mean, that you should establish many talmidim. Why? Because if she'im hamadata talmidim b'cheruchusecha, if you had established many talmidim in your early years, right, in the time when you were young, Amid talmidim, you should also establish talmidim af b'zuknusecha, also in your elder years, in your later years. Why? She'ata yodeh. You don't know which one's going to be more yikshur, which is going to be more prepared to be the best Talmud to pass on the Torah from one generation to the next. You know who's going to be more successful. You don't know if the Talmidim you set up and established when you were young, they're going to be more successful, and you don't know if the ones when you're old are going to be more successful. So don't rely on the fact that you had Talmidim early on in life. Keep making more and more Talmidim, because you never know who's going to be who's going to have the most success. Okay, very good. That's on a different angle. Okay, now let's see the Bnei Yonah, number 3.
העמידו תלמידים הרבה כדת
Beis Hillel.
בית הלל בעניין ששינו את שמיים ואומרים אין מלמדים אלא לתלמיד הגון וצנוע וקשה בירא שמיים, שנאמר איוב פרק כ' כ"א, וכל חשך תמן את צפונו.
So, okay, we have here a machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Okay, and the Rabbeinu is just touching on it briefly. He says this opinion that's expressed by the Anshe Knesset Gadol is like that das of Beis Hillel, that they were learning, and on this point as to whether or not a person should have Talmidim, what kind of Talmidim. So Beis Shammai said you're not supposed to teach a Talmud except if he's hagun, he's proper, tzenua, he's modest, and kosher, he's without blemish, and he has Yiras Shamayim. You have to have certain conditions to be able to teach a Talmud Torah, right? Now,
Do they throw orders on that?
Beis Hillel, all right, we're gonna see here the, take a look at number 7. The Rav Bartanurier goes a little bit different. We're gonna add make a conglomerate of several of the things we learned already. Take a look at number 7. Got it there?
Sure. Hamidu Tamin Harbe, you should raise many students. The Furkei, they wrote Rabbi Gamliel Dharma to exclude what Rabbi Gamliel says in Brachos. Kol Tamid She'ein Tocha Kabaro, whose inside is not like his outside. I constantly base of medrash. Do not let him into the base of medrash. Kamashman She Malamdin Torah L'chol Adam. On the other hand, you should teach Torah to all people.
Kamashman, which meaning like pumfrigan, meaning just so, but
Just
but
the
we because we're the Anshe Knesset Gedoli are teaching us. Kamashman, they are teaching us. Shel Malibdim, you should teach Torah. The Kolam, everybody.
The Ein Sarach leaves the Acharad. You don't need to examine them.
You don't have to check about it. You don't have to check into them. When a person comes to want to learn Torah, so you don't have to check into him. Like we learned that the Beis Shammai said he has to be Hagon, Tsunua, Kosher, B'Yir Shemayim, right? So, and that's basically, we'll see, that was basically Rabbi Gamliel's also his opinion, right? But Beis Hillel and the Anshe Knesset Gedoli, they're saying, no, you don't have to check after Talmud. He wants to come and learn, he can tell, except for 2 conditions, as the Rav Bartanur says.
Yidua Me'ino Shemasu Kilkulam Sone
Shemanya. Right. Bilvad Shelo Yed Yidua Minyano. As long as you know that his behavior, Minyano, his behavior, Shemas of his activities are not mikukalim, they're not corrupt. Meaning, as long as the person's not a corrupt person, and that he doesn't hate. I think Sanai, right? Sanai Shmun. He doesn't hate the learning.
Okay.
He's not coming here for intellectual activity. He's coming here because he wants to honestly learn Torah, right? Not for and as long as he's not a corrupt, criminal type of a person. Okay.
Inami Ashmoinen in Yevamos, Sh'im Ha'amid Talmud B'Choroso, if the Talmud starts learning in his youth, Yami Talmud B'Zakir, you should also have students. If you have students in your youth, you also have students in your old age. Ksiv Baboker Zarecha Le'erev Al Tinach Yadecha.
Right. That's a pasuk.
Skohelis, I'm not quite sure what that.
Right, but Boker in the morning, in the early part of the day, you should plant your seeds. The Arev, Alternate, and in the evening, don't let your hands rest. Meaning your hands should still be busy, even though you planted in the morning in your early life. Don't let in the later part of your don't rest from your activity. So that was basically like Rashi's pshat, and in the first part he brought was somewhat like the Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay, so now we have here so far it's like this. We have the Anshe Knesset Gedoli that says Umayim Talmidi Harbe. Okay, now I'm not sure why that specifically has to be understood according to the Rabbeinu Yonah. Why it has to be like Beis Hillel, right? That Beis Shammai said, in contrast, you can't teach a person similarly to Rabbi Gamliel unless he's proper, he's Hagun, he's kosher, Yir Shemayim, right? So maybe you could have a lot of Talmidim will like that, unless those are such difficult prerequisites that you're not going to be able to have a lot of Talmidim like that.
Right, you get the impression from what it's stated that that Rabbi Gamliel was very restrictive in who he let into the base medrash,
Right.
and as soon as he left and Rabbi Elisha took over, the place became packed. So there was a thirst that needed to be quenched, and if you're too restrictive, you don't get a chance to quench that thirst, and that if people don't get the chance to do the studying, that's when they can go off the derech. So the idea is, if you encourage people to come in and learn, and you make it comfortable to come in and learn, you can teach them not only you raise good, you will teach them properly.
You have an influence
You
on
have
them.
to respond to them,
Yep.
and that influence is what gets carried on from generation to generation. So better to teach more people even if, you're going to get people who are not necessarily the best, but every little bit that somebody learns is something that they can follow and pass on to the next generation. That just makes each generation stronger and stronger. You see what happens as the United States, as education increased over the last 20, 30 years, 40 years, whatever, the difference in the generations in terms of observance. And so I think that's...
But also, we're forgetting that Hill comes from a place where he wasn't allowed, didn't have the money to go into the base of Medrash, and used to go up on top in the winter and learn. And he said, leave it for anybody. You never know who's going to follow in our path also.
Right.
So from his experience, his philosophy had to have been that everybody should be able to come in without paying and without knowing who they are, because you never know who's going to come. That's also a philosophy that I'm sure he built up in his life with his own experience.
Quite possibly true, right.
How did Rabbi Yochanan take on Reish Lakish, who was the head of the listing?
Yeah, right.
How do you take him on?
Not only that, he took him on as a son-in-law also. Yeah,
Brother.
Yes, sister,
You got a
correct,
sister.
correct, sister.
If he took him on, we wouldn't have had Reish Lakish today.
Yeah, you're right. So, he actually, he saw his potential. According to Tosfos says that Reish Lakish actually was once a Talmud Chacham. He had learned it, and he was a Shoni Beperish. He went up with Derek and he put him back.
You also said that when he was a robber, he was rebelling against the Romans who were controlling the country.
Mm-hmm.
So he was an outlaw in the eyes of the Romans. Okay, he wasn't necessarily, over Torah or anything like that. He was an outlaw in the eyes of the Romans, and he hid in the mountains and things like that. So
Like a partisan.
yeah, he wasn't necessarily a bad person. He just was doing. It may have been, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be doing this. You'll have a better effect, a more lasting effect if you come sit and learn.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to see starting tomorrow, number 6 was the Magen Avos, the Rashbats, who's going to go into this. Possibly, let's just begin, because he mentions this machlokas, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So let's just take a few lines into the number 6, the Magen Avos L'Rashbats.
Okay, V'amidu Tamim Harba, you should raise many students. Shlo Kedas Beis Shammai, not according to the Das Beis Shammai. Shahu Omrim Ein Lam Torah Ela Talmud Hogan V'Tznua V'Kashva Yershmai, who has very strict requirements for students. K'moshahu Nizkar Ba'avos Rav Nassan, as explained in Avos Rav Nassan.
Right. That's a corresponding. That's in fact what you might even call like the Gemara on Avos. Avos, again, as we mentioned at the very beginning when we started learning, is Mishnayos. There's no Gemara on Avos. However, there is. It's actually here in your standard Shas. They have it printed. Avos to Rabbi Nassan, which actually brings down many things related based on the Mishnayos of Pirkei Avos, and it could be considered somewhat like a Gemara on the Mishnayos Avos. And so there he explains that he explains the machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, right over there.
V'kenai Omer Rav Gamliel, and similar to what Rav Gamliel says. Kol Tamishin Tocha Gavaro, any student whose inside is not like his outside, right? Ayakanas the base of Medrash shouldn't come into the base of Medrash. Beis Hillel, on Beis Hillel says, Mam Yechol, you should teach everybody. V'chein Hashivu Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, V'avaro Rabbi Gamliel, Nistalku, Shomrei Pesach, Manisas Hakal, that I guess when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah replaced Rabbi Gamliel, he took the guards away from the door,
right,
from the doors to the base of Medrash, and let people come in. Osofo Kama Sifsele, they filled up all the benches.
Right,
they added more benches. Added more benches.
Yes.
Okay. Hahu Yoma the base of Medrash. On that day in the base of Medrash. Kloshahu.
Okay, maybe it's one more. Okay, now So basically, we have basically, the, my focus Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And, then you have the Machlokas, Rabbi Gamliel and, Rabbi Azara, Ben Azariah. Now, the only question I'm trying to understand is if the Anshe Knesset Gedorlah, who preceded all of the Tanoim, they were the very beginning, right? If they said, right, Ma'aminu Talmid Harbe, so how do we understand that Beis Shammai and Rabbi Gamliel seem to differ with that? Meaning, this was something they couldn't argue on. So how did they feel they were fulfilling the words of the Anshe Knesset Gedorlah in spite of their opinions?
It was the times.
Well, the other thing is, the Anshe Knesset didn't say call.
Right.
They
They didn't say you have to bring in everything. You have
Okay.
to teach everyone. You know.
And, it's almost like at the time of Beis Hillel and Rabbi Nazar, it's a Hara Shah. It's based on, like, I'm going to say, it's based on the conditions of the times. They were saying we need to let more, even if we're letting a lot of people, we're having lots of students, maybe we need to have more. Okay? And, it's the type of thing, and they decided that better off letting more people in. Okay? Not that we didn't have, the base measures in the time of Rabbi Gamliel, the base measures wasn't empty. There were definitely people in the base measures, and lots of students and stuff. But it's clear that there could have been many more. But it doesn't mean they weren't fulfilling it of having many students. There's many and there's many.
Okay.
One was one of the quality, one was one of the quantity also.
Could be.
And then also the times maybe, they didn't trust who was coming into the base of Medrash
Right.
to learn, maybe because the Siddusi, there was all these things happening around that time.
Sure. So, I think you're saying both very good. I think if we concentrate on the expression, it says Mido Talmidim Hor. You should establish many Talmidim. It didn't say you should teach many Talmidim, right? It's simply just to talk and to say over and to teach many Talmidim. It didn't say that. If that would be the case, right, then it would be a whole different situation. The question might have been how to when you have a command from the Anshe Knesset to establish Talmidim. So if a Talmud is not going to be Chogan, he's not going to be proper, he's not going to have Yerushalayim, right? So he's not going to be Tzunuim, he's not going to have certain qualities. So that could have been a deterrent to establishing such a Talmud as a Talmud, meaning it's too much work perhaps to try and take such a Talmud like that to establish it. If we just teach, if they were told us to teach many Talmidim, so you can teach to many people, right? But if you want to establish a Talmud,
But you never know when you're going to come across Rabbi Akiva.
yeah.
Rabbi Akiva was not one of those people who would have been necessarily.
Well, I don't know. See, a lot of people think the Tosfos explains Rabbi Akiva. He was an Am Haaretz, but he was Shomer Shabbos. He kept Torah, right? Because otherwise he wouldn't have married Rosh. Rosh would have been interested in a Mechalel Shabbos.
Sure,
someone who, he maybe was because you have to realize at the time at that particular time, there were no set ways of a father would teach his son Torah, and we know Rabbi Akiva came from Gary, right? So they may have not known that much, but they didn't have been really steeped in Torah enough to teach his son.
Right,
so
right.
He grew up in Am Haaretz, and at that time the Amorat seemed the unknowledgeable Jewish people. They had a certain dislike for the Talmud of coming.
Right, I'm saying. But had he been under a very strict regimen, he might not have gotten into yeshiva. And that's okay. And then had he not gotten in, he wouldn't have become Rabbi Akiva. So by being, like Beis Shammai and Rabbi Gamliel, where you're restricted, yes, you're getting very fine people in there, and there's no question you're getting very fine people in there. You don't know what effect you're going to have on somebody else.
Right.
Okay, somebody else who doesn't fit into your mold exactly.
Right.
Okay, but has the kernel of what you want, that you may not even be able to see, because the water hasn't cracked the rock yet.
Right.
Okay, and you miss somebody. You don't know what happens if you become too restricted. You miss people like that.
Okay, we're gonna have to explore, we have to try, I think what could be, what the question we have to try and understand is, what's the goal? Meaning, what's the goal of, when we wanna, mime many talmidim, what's the goal here? If we're gonna go back to the original thing that we said, that we wanna have with the more talmidim and more pilpul, the more truthful understanding of what's going on, so it could be like if you get a lot of people that are not really, if they're somewhat corrupt, right, they're gonna bring these kind of ideas into the conversations, into the discussions, and that could be detrimental. Okay, we'll have to see, we'll have to try and explore a little bit more. Mitzvah Shem tomorrow.